A new academic year has just started in the system of high school and higher education. Its beginning is accompanied by endless disputes over the reform of people's education. 135 million rubles have already been spent on the experiment to expand school education to 12-year education. In the new version, it will be continued for the students of 1,500 schools in 76 regions of Russia. Is the search for changes, the need for which there is no doubt because our cadres do not even know the basics of socially useful governance, going in the right direction?
Viktor Alexeyevich, what, in your opinion, is the root cause of the overdue reform of people's education?
Towards the beginning of the 21st century, humanity entered a fundamentally new phase of its development, when the constant period of generational change, 25 years, equaled the constantly decreasing period of the change of technologies dominating on Earth. In one of the programs, we stopped at the explanations of this period and called it the period of change in the logics of social behavior. Once the stone axe dominated for millennia, the steam engine for centuries, and today the Japanese assert that in order to maintain competitive advantages, technologies must be radically renewed every 5 to 10 years. That is, many times during the lifetime of one generation. This is where a radically new challenge to the education system of the 21st century lies. Earlier, it was possible to give students a certain amount of knowledge of facts and be sure that this would be enough for the rest of their lives, during which there would be no changes. Now, this is impossible in principle. Consequently, it is necessary to change the vector of objectives of people's education. From encoding factological pedagogy, we must move to methodological pedagogy, capable of instilling, first of all, the skills and methodology of mastering new knowledge. Informational adaptation to the place of work should be entrusted to the most methodologically competent, literate person. A unified state system of cadres re-education should be created, covering all age groups from infancy to old age, equally accessible to people from all strata of our society.
Do I understand correctly that increasing the duration of school education to 12 years will fundamentally change nothing?
You are absolutely right. The time has come. We have to move from hopes of simple quantitative changes to qualitative changes, and to reduce the time for basic school preparation to 8 to 9 years. Among other things, it should be borne in mind that the information boom which is being experienced by humanity leads to the non-success of extensive education, trying to keep up with the multiply increasing volume of information. School programs, and in their turn, children, become unacceptably overloaded. This is a dead-end path of development.
And what, in your opinion, should a new type of pedagogy, methodological pedagogy, be aimed at?
None of the proposals for the reform of people's education touch upon its methodology, the essential content side. Meanwhile, the system of compulsory education for all should set fundamentally different objectives of studying. Man is primarily a type of psyche structure. It is the formation of the type of psyche structure of a reasoning human that should be the basis of methodological pedagogy. It is necessary in the process of studying, first of all, to give a clear understanding of the characteristics of the animal, zombie biorobot, and demonic psyche types. Knowledge should be classified only as one or another dowry to the type of psyche structure. A well-educated, intelligent blackguard can be much more dangerous to society than an undereducated person. And all the efforts of teachers will ultimately be nullified if students do not comprehend alcohol as a genetic weapon. The alcohol abuser is more dangerous for society the higher educational and social status he has. I would like to note that this mission of the education system is shared by our President Vladimir Putin. On October the 2nd, speaking at the school of the village of Kostrova, which is in the Moscow region, he noted, "Education is not only a set of knowledge, it is a worldview that gives children a view on life, dobro and evil." Proceeding from this, people's education should provide the following skills: the ability to distinguish, i.e. select from a huge plurality of information, useful and important information, against the background of less important and useless information currently dominant in mass media. The ability for a holistic, mosaic perception of the phenomena of being in their interconnection and internesting. The ability to distinguish between dobro and evil, to be consciously aware of the modern methods of egregorial matrix governance, zombification of consciousness, and undermining of the genetic potential of people. The ability to meaningfully counteract the undermining of the gene pool and the transformation of people into zombie biorobots at the worldview level to detune from genetic weapons, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, computer and television addiction, certain types of music. The ability to form the priorities of objectives and the vector of objectives for governance towards social processes and particular processes in one's own sphere of activity. The ability to distinguish the belonging of any particular means and factors of impact on society to one or another priority of generalized means of governance towards prosperity, life and death of society. Methodological, chronological, ideological, economic, genocidal, and military priorities.
And what practical skills should, in your opinion, be cultivated by the school?
The school should cultivate a sufficiently high level of development of sensory abilities. The widest range of abilities of our senses and brain remains unclaimed. Instead of developing them, we develop all kinds of prostheses for them. A person who receives a basic education must be able to read a book at the speed of page turnover, use the keyboard of information processing facilities with the blind 10-finger method, because a person types faster than he writes. Education should provide skills and techniques of relaxation and psychological support, concentration of thought, otherwise the ability to study is sharply reduced. My thoughts are jumping all over the place. This is how the problem is reflected at the unconscious level in one of the Russian popular songs. A practical understanding of the possibilities and methods of impact on a person through art, the mass media, music, etc. is necessary, as well as who uses these impacts on society and how and for what objectives. It is necessary to form an understanding of the correlation between the conscious and unconscious levels of the psyche, like the correlation between a pilot and an autopilot. Students have to understand the mechanisms of intuitive insights. Upon graduation, they have to have mastered no less than 2 foreign languages. The abundance of subjects for people's education should contribute to the formation of skills in planning one's own time.
And what can you say about the subjects themselves, the basic provision of secondary school education?
In secondary school, 3 objective-oriented directions of education have to be singled out. The directions that form the human type of psyche structure. The first direction forms the right hemisphere of the brain, subject figurative thinking, culture of speech, holistic perception of the world. This is provided by the historical, philosophical, linguistic, and literary disciplines. The second direction works out the culture of the left hemisphere, abstract logical thinking. These are mathematical disciplines. The third direction works out a culture of interaction between subject figurative and abstract logical thinking. These are applicative factological disciplines. Their scientific nature begins from the moment they begin to use the mathematical apparatus. The emphasis in the educational process should be made on the formation of holistic views about the functional abilities of this or that science, but not on the university completeness of the course and rigorous proofs. For example, mathematics cannot be divided into higher or further and lower maths. Secondary school should acquaint students with the possibilities of all the most general branches of unified mathematics, from arithmetic to set theory, differential and integral calculus. Primary views on probability theory are especially important. There is also a fundamental problem in our education system, which inevitably leads to a system crisis of state governance. All our specialists are divided into technological branches and are engaged in the arrangement of their own spheres. None of them is preparing to govern the ship of our statehood as a whole. Take, for example, our parties. Each one is trying to pull the blanket full of holes towards themselves. One party defends the interests of the agrarians, the second one the interests of pensioners, the third party the interests of military men, and so on. The knowledge of different branches do not have a single semantic bridge among themselves. They even have different terminology. They cannot communicate, supplement each other, and borrow the latest achievements from each other. The basis of people's education should be the sufficiently general theory of governance, which is equally necessary in any branch of knowledge. It is the sufficiently general theory of governance that should act as a language of interdisciplinary communication. The sufficiently general theory of governance with its terminological conceptual apparatus should unite all branches of the currently scattered 2000 sciences into a single system of knowledge. It should direct them into the stream of socially useful activity. Only on the basis of such systemic knowledge can we ensure stable, crisis-free governance towards our country, and indeed towards all of humanity. The course of the sufficiently general theory of governance, as a branch of the conception of social safety, Deadwater, is given in a number of universities, including universities in St. Petersburg.
Viktor Alexeyevich, how do some of the applied problems of people's education look from their conceptual point of view? Fee-paying education, special schools, single-sex education, etc.
The most serious methodological mistake is the transition to a fee-paying education system. In the case of free people's education, the social base of governors is the whole society, including naturally gifted children from low-income families, and the quality of governance improves. With fee-paying education, access to the sphere of governance gradually narrows down to certain clans, which in turn are susceptible to degradation due to excess of wealth and a violation of the sense of measure. As a result, the core of governors also degrades, and the quality of governance decreases. As for the elite special schools, their existence is not justified by time. A magnificent group of scientists emerged from the workers' and peasants' environment, which did not have an elitarian worldview. The elitarian worldview began to form as the intelligentsia began to reproduce itself, including through special schools, mathematics, foreign languages, etc. It is good if there are family dynasties of workers, but not dynasties that monopolize one or another branch of science, aircraft design bureaus, and so on. Special schools lead to early, narrow specialization with a weakening of general methodological education. From our point of view, the variant of equal schools is preferable. However, the process of studying there must be such that it stimulates self-studying, when the student himself gains the necessary and possible for him maximum. Striving for self-improvement, for independent work, this is the most important quality that requires its development. Special schools translate initiative into compulsory actions and do not contribute to the strengthening of independence. With regard to single-sex education, this is a kind of litmus test of the conceptual consistency of people's education. High-class governors of conceptual, supranational level of significance are educated, as a rule, in a system of single-sex education. Recall at least the graduates of Lyceum, where A.S. Pushkin got his education. We have already emphasized that the number one thing that should be cultivated in students from childhood is concentration of attention. So co-education inevitably, at the level of instincts, leads to distraction in the process of such studying. By the way, for the same reason, the state which claims conceptual autocracy has to introduce a compulsory, same for everyone, school uniform. This is done not only for aesthetic reasons, but also to minimize distraction. A special issue of the modern school is classroom ergonomics, the color of walls, the arrangement of furniture, its shape, and other elements of the organization of classroom space. These details can both increase the effectiveness of studying and reduce this effectiveness to zero.
Viktor Alexeyevich, what can you say about preschool work with children?
A special role in the life of every person is played by the period of early childhood, when the process of formation of the personality takes place. In the future, it is only the development of the foundations obtained that takes place, and all kinds of attempts aimed at re-upbringing are made. Proceeding from this, I should say that if society thinks about its future, then at the stage of preschool education, it surrounds children with educators, teachers of the highest level of nraviousness and professionalism. These must be really gifted by God people. It is they who must detect the future calling of every child and set the direction of his development. It is no coincidence that in Japan a preschool teacher is one of the most prestigious and highly paid jobs. In this regard, objective-oriented systemic educational work with parents is also very important, from the moment preceding the conception of the baby to his graduation from school. The solution of these, as well as many other tasks of the transition to methodological pedagogy, is impossible without the direct participation in these processes of all, with no exception, mass media. All state television and radio companies are simply obliged to conduct daily programs from the parent institution to the Educating Common to All program on the sufficiently general theory of governance, on the conception of social safety as a whole. All the current open methods of magic and television wizardry, the zombification of the psyche of the younger generation towards eradicating humanness, towards violence, debauchery, alcoholization, should be removed from the screen, at least of the state mass media. Everything that we and our children see on the TV screen inevitably flows into our everyday life. These are elementary truths for those who understand the system of egregorial matrix governance.